Hi, welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your consciousness transformation and ascension guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. Today's topic came from a discussion, actually multiple discussions, but it's funny because as soon as I start having a discussion and say, "Oh, I feel a ping that I might want to talk about this," then all of a sudden I start seeing it in like 5 different places. So it was great to see how it sort of came up. And it's really an important topic to cover that we blow over because we don't even realize what we have done in the perception of this. And that has to do with free will. When we talk about it in spiritual context, we talk about it in religious context, right? And so we are discussing things like having, free will is our gift, and you can't take away our free will, and it's a bad thing to have to not have free will. And then there's the question as to whether or not it truly is the case, right? Because some people are, I guess they call them fatalists. That doesn't sound very positive, but who are very, well, it's all fate. And then there are some that say, no, that's what free will is about, and it's all about that journey. And so here's my understanding, because it's an important thing to discuss and consider, because it's time for us to look at things continuously on the bigger picture. So that's what I talk about here in Living the Shift. That's what Sarah C. Gavagnoni and I talk about on Monday mornings on Ascended World, or the bigger picture concepts and how to really apply them into our day-to-day lives, and how how it is for us to exist embodied differently in a way that's more expanded in consciousness, and I guess enlightened is the word that a lot of people use. So something like free will is something that holds us back in many cases, or we believe, what we've allowed ourselves to believe at the collective level truly is something we've become blind to within ourselves as to what it really means, what we're really doing about that. Good morning, Gloria. What we're really doing about that, and how it is for us to maybe shift our perspective into a much more uh, expanded perception, right? So let's talk about free will. Typically, when we talk about free will, we talk about it in the context of I am I have free will to choose what I want to choose. And that's absolutely true. When we pull out and we zoom out into the bigger picture and we start looking at what free will actually is, and I'm going to talk about this from my understanding. So, we look at free will as taking a choice, making a choice, having a choice. And with that means that when I make a choice, this is the idea, if I make a choice, then I am not making another choice. And that is a duality and separation based concept. It is based out of the ego, and I'm not saying this with judgment. It's just something for us to expand our consciousness about perceiving, right? So I'm going to look at when we say free will, right? It's about the choice thing, and then that means that there's a yes and a no, or right and a wrong, or a good and bad, or an on and off, right? That I do or I don't. That a me and a not me. What I do or not do. What I be or not be. And all that has to do with the ego, because as I understand it, the ego's creation was, and its job has been, to explore separation and duality and identity. And in that is where we create the concept of free will. So actually the concept of free will is an egoic invention and understanding, because when we pull out to even more expanded understandings, we recognize that we make all the choices. We do make all choices. And yes, in duality, there are choices. That's what we wanted to do, to have the experience that we're having through this multiverse, duality, triality, all kinds of splits and whatnot. So as the divine, as the whole, when we go into that concentric expansion of consciousness, we get to a place of recognizing that the whole quantum field, whether you want to call it God, consciousness, quantum field, the universe, uh, source, creator, whatever you want to call it, as that, as a fractal embodied of the whole, and we have the whole within us as well as around us, we have made all choices. We have created all choices, all options, all possibilities. We have created them in their possibility in themselves. And in doing that, my understanding is now, it's funny, we have to put our mind aside for a minute and feel into this. But it's my understanding that we make all of the choices, that we do all of them, right? That's why we have parallel timelines, multiple lifetimes, multiple dimensions, because we try everything every which way, or we create it every which way. We don't try it, we create it every which way. We experience it in that illusion of duality and separation. So, really, what free will is more of, what are the choices I'm making in this part of my consciousness, in this embodiment right this moment? That is my free will. That is what's created of what I've created as the whole into the individual separation and individuality. So we get into this place where we judge, again, ego based, separation, duality, based. We judge that it's good or bad to have free will or not. So, in one way, yes, we have free will. In another way, there's no such thing. Because there's nothing we don't do. We do it all. So, it's not like we say, I'm going to do this and not that, or I'm not going to do that and I'm going to choose this. We do try all the options out, is my understanding. And one of the best, great, fun examples of that, if you've watched the Men in Black movies, the third movie of Men in Black, they had what they called a fifth dimensional being embodied there. And it was so funny because even when my husband and I went to the movies, we went to the movies and watched it when it first came out. And I remember we're sitting in the movies like, oh my gosh, look at that. And we're both look at like, wow, look at what they have embedded in this movie in terms of consciousness, right? So this fifth dimensional being in the movie, like he'd come in and go out, come in, and he would just be like, is this the timeline where this happens in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? And it would be like, and that's all he was always talking about as well. Oh, I hope this is this the, and it was funny. It was like made as a joke. Is this the timeline where this happens? Or I hope this isn't the timeline where this happens. Insinuating or really sort of stating out there that we have all of these different parallel timelines where we have all the different choices that we make. Is this where you forget to leave a tip or you leave a tip? Is this where you do this or you do that, or you do this or you do that? We do all of them, right? So in that consciousness of that fifth dimensional being that they have in the movie, that was a great personification of being in a conscious state where we see all the choices being made in all these different um, all these different options that we're playing out. So Sarah says it as asking if this is for me right now, exercising free will, or is it free will, or is free will a construct like time? I guess it's both, right? I guess it's both. Is this for me? Is this for me right now? Interesting. Yeah. I guess it. Oh, wow. That just changes the whole. Opens up another door of looking at how to shift our focus on creation, right? It's because if you look at that the being in the movie, right, he's constantly just sort of like floating around and he's just so present, and yet at the same time he's seeing the whole, like all the options playing out simultaneously, right? And if we do, is this asking for me? Is this for me right now? It's like, it is a construct. Well, because we're creating the choice. When we create the choice, we're creating a construct of how we play it out. And if we look at how we create these parallel times, what a great question that is, Sarah. When we look at these different parallel timelines, or not even parallel, just timelines, all of these, yeah, parallel, simultaneous timelines, everything simultaneous outside of time and space, which is why I sort of hesitate to say that. But if we look at everything simultaneously and we're seeing it from that perspective, we choose. Choosing is the free will, right? Our choice, creating the choice and then employing the choice is what I'm getting is the free will concept. And so everything is a choice. And so I've talked about that a bajillion times. Sarah and I have talked about that on Monday, a countless number of times on making choices, and everything is a choice. So even if we claim victimhood to something, we are choosing that at some level because we have created that situation for ourselves. And when we resolve the completion of that, when we choose to resolve the completion of that lesson or set lessons we wanted to play out, then we can change, then we just change the situation. Is this for me right now? It's an interesting question, Sarah. Is this for me? Yeah, it is. Actually, everything's for us right now if we take out the construct of time and space, right? Good morning, Karen. So it's very amoebic is what I'm feeling like. It's very much a non-defined thing when we think it's defined, right? So free will is truly making a choice, whatever the choice is right this moment, and all of them are right. When we look at it from the bigger perception, there's no wrong choice. Everything gets us to the completion. Everything, well, because there's never a moment when we're not in completion. So everything comes around to completing the lessons that we chose to complete in separation and going up to even so many levels of consciousness, of expanded consciousness, where we're looking at the bigger picture, and we're saying, okay, well, this is what I'm choosing as this particular set of lessons or this particular theme. That's even at a collective level. And so let's play out all those choices on creating that, on completing that, on coming around full circle. Wow, that just is opening up so many doors. I didn't even have any clue that this would get so big. So I'm going back though to this whole free will thing because when I first was doing energy work, yeah, Sarah says like having a whole deck of cards and choosing one, right? Because then if I don't like that card, or if I play out that card and then I watch how it plays out, then I can choose another card because I have the whole deck. I can choose all of them. I could do 52 pickup if I want to. So, but if you go back to the everyday, every moment thing, right? And going into our free will, if you look at, we have vilified collective consciousness because collectively the collective ego just does not like that collective consciousness, or like giving away the option of a choice, the idea of a choice, when the reality is I chose to create this as the divine. I chose to create the egos. I chose to create the identities and the separation. I chose to create the lessons and the experiences and the options and the possibilities. I've created all of them. That's my divine right, my divine natural state as the whole thing, the whole shebang. Again, whether you want to call it divine consciousness, God, the quantum field, the universe, whatever. Universal energy. I mean, it's all the same. And so, but if you look at how much like we have in our popular culture, how many stories and TV and movies and books that talk about, losing free will, being controlled by someone else, being controlled by one group, being controlled by another, not having the free will. You know what? The funniest part is I was never a big fan of this show, but when I was a kid, my mother made me watch the original Star Trek over and over and over and over all the time. I ended up liking like the Next Generation, but I was never really a big fan of the original. But I do remember there were quite a few episodes that come to mind vaguely about they're talking about free will, like, oh well, this is bad because they don't have free will. And then there's always the way this plays out where there's somebody, who really has this megalomaniac, this like uh big narcissistic need to control everybody else. And then we look at the option of control and we say, okay, so does that mean in control somebody controlling me, that I don't have free will? And then there's always the fight to allow free will, right? In these movies, the Borg, yeah, Sarah says the Borg, yeah, that was the big one, right? Assimilate or be destroyed or whatever it was. In the Next Generation, which is the Star Trek that I did like. But yeah, the Borg, and we've had so many fights in our popular culture. Fights, I mean, talking about in the stories about we fight for free will, we fight to like have that that individual journey. Well, we've created all of them, individual, non-individual. We've created everything that had to do with power and control and victimhood. We've created every interaction, action and reaction. We've created all of that. We've created what we have as a structure for science. We have, which if you look within our bodies, we have 2 to 3 trillion cells at any given time, and they're always doing an action and reaction to something. All energy. And so, do we have free will? Of course, we have free will because we are the creators of all of the choices. However, what we are fighting about in terms of losing free will is the egoic perception of it, saying, "Well, my fate is determined for me by somebody else." Well, there's nobody else except for me because we're all the divine. We're all of it. That's the understanding. And when we truly start to accept that, it's like, well, then why would I ever say that? Yeah, so yeah, it is predetermined because I already determined the whole thing. It's out of space and time. It's already done. So yes, in that case, I have decided on my choices. And funny that even if I don't choose that here, I'm actually choosing it in other timelines and playing it out. Another great example that I've used for years is the movie Sliding Doors, which I just happened to catch on on Sling TV like a couple weeks ago, which I haven't watched the movie in a long time, but I own it. I just haven't watched it. And it's a great movie. It's got Gwyneth Paltrow in it. I think it was like from early 2000s. And it's a great play out of parallel timelines. It's this woman who, in the beginning of the movie, makes a choice, misses a train or catches a train. And then the whole movie is split into 2 parallel timelines on what happens to her when she catches the train and what she goes through when she misses the train. And then see things how they overlap and how they both end up in different places but the same, and they have same kind of interactions with different people. And so it's just a very simple. Some people say they can't fathom what multiple timelines and stuff are because their mind is still thinking very linear in very linear terms. So if you watch a movie like Sliding Doors, it's a great opportunity to sort of expand your consciousness and think, okay, so there's 2 parallel timelines. What if we create 100, 1,000, 100,000 parallel timelines for this particular choice? Because that's all the choices that I could possibly make. That's what we do, is my understanding. And when we get done in every iteration of our, and we get done out of our individual journey of this particular embodiment, then we look at all the options that we've played out. Yeah, Sarah says, imagine if our cells decided they wanted egoic free will. Crazy, right? I'm not going to be a hand today. I'm not going to be a liver. I don't think I'm going to be like a heart. I think I'm going to do this instead. And it's not that they don't, it's that these are the things we've created in separation. We have different levels of choices, right? Conscious choices. Um, so Gloria says that would mean we now really don't have free will. Scary. There's nothing scary about it. Only when we say something is scary, the ego says it's scary because that is implying that it's scary because we don't know, that we have limits or whatever. We are limiting ourselves. This is the point of this whole discussion, is we're limiting ourselves by using the term free will, because free will is actually a limiting term. Free will is limiting itself in the context that we use it, in the way of um, that the ego is saying, I want to choose this and not that. We're choosing every choice. We're choosing every possibility. So there's no such thing as free will because there's no limits to what we create and choose. So we have the ultimate free will of creation. We are all of it. So we're all of creation. We are the creation. We are the one, we are the consciousness that creates all of this. And in that, there's no need for free will because there's no exclusions. And when we talk about free will, we're talking about exclusion, like I'm going to do this and not that. I want the option to do this and not that. Well, yeah, that's what the ego's here. That's what the ego's here to do, and that's why the ego says it's scary. The only time we say something is scary or dangerous or yeah, that we fear it, we have anxiety or anger about it, that's all from the ego. Remember, that's all from the ego. So it's all from a perspective of separation and exclusion and identity expansion, which means there's a me and a not me. But when we really embrace that, we really embrace that wholeness, to recognize that we are all of it. There is no not me. It's all me. So I make, look at Gloria's choices and Sarah's choices and Karen's choices and everybody else's choices. I make all of those because you're all me and you make mine, because we're all the same consciousness creating these players. I always think of it like a stage, right? And so we're the producers, the writers, and the actors on the stage, and we're constantly changing our costumes. And we're constantly saying, well, I'm going to take this character in this direction. I'm going to take this character in this direction. And so when we start looking at that from that perspective, then we stop worrying about the free will thing, because we know that it's all me anyway, right? So in terms of when we talk about spiritual work, when we talk about doing energy healing and things like that, there are two things that are really important to remember. Because we talk about, oh, well, don't do something to somebody against their free will because they have free will. They absolutely have free will in their individual, right? That's the choices that they're making to take it and not take it. But here's the thing. When we say, I am going to do oh, be careful, like this. I remember when I first got into energy healing work, before Trinity came into me and I started teaching that. And I took all kinds of energy healing and Reiki and all a bunch of different kinds. And they would talk about, oh, well, be careful about, employing your free will, employing somebody's, stepping over into somebody's free will, and don't send them something without their permission. And at some point, my guidance was just, well, if you offer it at a higher level of consciousness, they're going to choose at a higher level, at an expanded level of consciousness, whether or not to take it into that individual part. And so, by the way, and number two, the most important part is we don't send anything but a reminder on how an individual remembers to access that energy themselves. So we're not giving them something they don't already have. We are sending them. So in sending love or in sending an expanded, we're not really sending. And this is why it's a challenging thing for me to explain. It's like when we go out and work in energy healing, we work in the quantum field. We work in the God field, as the divine consciousness, and we lose our separation out there. And we can intend for this remembrance to be in an individual, of this creation that we intend in whatever the healing effort is. And it is up to that individual, that's the free will, the individual, to say, I will allow myself to change this for myself, or I will not allow myself to change it for myself. And so we don't have anything to send, right? So it's funny, I always say, oh, send healing and whatever. And it's like, well, I'm sending love for me. I'm opening my heart and connecting with you outside of space and time as we are one anyway, and helping, like, and I'm just expanding love and holding that space so that hopefully you will remember that you're that love and that you have that love and support at all times. So it's really very different from what our minds think it is. And when we talk about free will, it's like, well, this person did this to me against my will. Well, then you had some kind of choice that you made to lose, to be a victim to them. You had some kind of soul agreement to allow it. You have some kind of lessons that you are choosing to learn about unworthiness of having that kind of power. And so, like, for example, I've worked with individuals who've had what they call dark entities constantly impeding on their space, impeding in their physical body. I've had people who've even tried to get exorcisms and stuff like that through the church, and they've come to me to ask if I could help. And I'm like, of course. And what comes down to, and it was funny because there was one individual I worked with for a couple of years and had an entire life of these really, really movie type extreme situations that had happened in his life. And where he felt like, like possessions and this and that. And he'd done all this work and different kinds of practices, came back to me and we were working, and then like he left and came back, and he had gotten better as long as we did the work together, and he was doing that work from that wholeness and oneness and that remembrance of the power of the divine and being whole. And then he would go in these other practices. I was saying, oh well, you have to be humble, you're not all that, you have to learn, you have to let me help you and all that kind of stuff. Well, then as soon as he started giving his power away again, those other beings started to really infiltrate him again. And so he came back to me and said, can you help me? I know you can help me. So I'm asking, can you help me? But I know you can help me. And I was like, yeah, because we've done this before. So why did you change that? Well, there was a whole story behind that. And I said, okay, that's fine. I said, okay, so here's the key. The key is, and it's always the key for all of this, for any time we feel like somebody's impeding on our free will. A, are you working on your self-worthiness? Because if you believe that you are worthy, if you believe that you are infinitely powerful as the divine, then you will be able to manage your entire energy field to hold it however you choose, which means that nobody will get there against your will. Because even the idea and the experience of something happening against your will is not against your will. It's an experience to show you as a mirror and a reflection to you where you hold this idea in your identity of separation that you are not worthy. And when you shift that to a place of worthiness, then it is easy to dispel of all of that. It becomes effortless. So, and it's a challenging thing because when somebody just comes off the street, and I have people have called me like, oh, I think this person's possessed, or I think I'm possessed, or I think this. And it's like, right, are you ready to really do this? Because that comes from your really deep unworthiness that you're allowing this in. And I've had situations where I've done sessions with people who've had attachments, and we've done a session together, and while I'm in the session, the attachment detaches and sort of like is there, and I've had it communicate with me, well, I'm just going to reattach when this individual leaves because they don't believe they're worthy of me not being here. Straight out, I understood that. So all of it is a choice, right? And we're also those shadow beings. We're also those beings. So all of it is us. And if we're all of it, then there's no like non-free will because you can't impede on me because you're me anyway. So we're just in the same thing and deciding what we're doing in that separation, exploration. And we've decided out, an expanded consciousness. And so it's a much different perspective on how we play out our roles and our parts here in the 3D. So when we start to look at things from like, the energy perspective, so I would never, first of all, first and foremost, I ask guidance, and guidance. My focus is on is accessing divine remembrance, and so I ask with guidance all the time. Is it for me to connect with this individual outside of space and time to offer this shift? Sometimes I'm in meditation and I do it without even asking, because guidance is go and do this because y'all have this connection that they will accept that remembrance for, like with your facet, right? So that's why we see this is all another discussion too. Wow, this is just a big can of worms. But that's where we see facets of the divine, that we call guides, right? It's just another form of our energy that reflects back to us in a way that we will take it and allow ourselves to remember. So remember, what I tell people all the time is nobody heals you but you. Nobody changes you but you. It is your choice whether to accept what others impose on you or project onto you or not, or to access your own. And they're you anyway. So it's just this sort of like there is no free will. It's ultimate free will. It's no different. They're both the same thing. So that was just a little tidbit of something to think about for this week. On that, I'm going to let you go. Yeah, but look at that in terms of how you approach things. And it's not for you to start imposing your will on other individuals, because your will is your ego. It's your individuality, and it's your power, your energy that you give behind your individuality. That is egoic. And always remember that when we impose our will or allow somebody to impose our, and it's all an ego play, but that's all part of what we've agreed to. And then you say, as we would say with anything else, what is this here to show me to remember about myself? And that's what there is for me to shift so that this somehow dissipates and goes away. Or I choose differently and create it differently. So look at that within your life. Look at that within your interactions. And if you are a energy healing facilitator, remember, like I don't like using the word energy healer because it implies that I'm healing somebody else. I am an energy healer on me. And everybody else, I'm an energy healing facilitator because I help them to remember how to access that part of themselves that they've forgotten. That's what this is all about. And so there's like I said, it's really different facets of us helping each other to remember in the mirrors that we're creating for each other, whether it is what the ego perceives as a limiting victimhood role or an empowering, expansive role. It's all the same. It's all part of the game in the fun house that we've created. So on that, I'll let you go. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me. Have a good one. This is Angela Coulter signing out with this week's Living the Shift. Bye.